The lights of the CNN studio gleamed against the polished chrome of the set, the morning hum of production alive with quiet tension. Cameras were being adjusted, the makeup team scurried about with brushes and powder, and behind the glass, a cluster of producers whispered into their headsets, finalizing cues. Christiane Amanpour, poised in her signature black attire, adjusted her notes with calm precision. She had interviewed presidents, war correspondents, and revolutionaries, but today, she was sitting across from a Hollywood legend, Kevin Costner. Costner arrived with that steady, unhurried gait that defined his on-screen presence, a man who looked like he'd just stepped off a horse in a western. His face carried the calm confidence of a veteran actor, but his eyes, behind the calm exterior, showed a hint of weariness. Years of promoting Horizon, an American epic, his dream project, had drained him. He wasn't just selling a movie, he was defending a lifetime's worth of work, his creative soul poured into every frame. "Ready when you are, Christiane," a producer called from behind the camera. The red light blinked on. Amanpour smiled warmly. "Kevin Costner, welcome, it's an honor to have you." "Thank you," he said with a nod. "Happy to be here." At first, the conversation flowed like any other. They spoke of his long career, from Dances with Wolves to Yellowstone. Costner described the grueling filming schedules, the unforgiving landscapes of Utah, and the depth of research that went into Horizon. The audience saw two professionals exchanging ideas, but those in the studio could feel something beneath the surface, a tightening energy, like static before a storm. Then came the pivot, subtle, sharp, deliberate. "Kevin," Amanpour began, her tone soft but her eyes intent. "Some critics have said Horizon portrays the westward expansion in a way that still centers on the settler experience, and perhaps doesn't do enough to reflect the indigenous perspective. How do you respond to that?" Costner's smile thinned slightly. "Well," he began slowly, "I think that's a misunderstanding. The film doesn't glorify the expansion. It shows the pain, the struggle, the loss, for everyone involved. It's about the cost of ambition." Amanpour nodded but pressed on. "Yet, many indigenous historians argue that Hollywood still tends to portray the frontier story through the eyes of the colonizer. Isn't there an inherent bias in that narrative, one you, as a filmmaker, are perpetuating?" The air thickened. Even the camera operators glanced at each other. Costner's posture stiffened, just barely, but enough for the crew to notice. "Christiane," he said evenly, "I've spent years trying to tell balanced stories. Dances with Wolves was one of the first mainstream films to treat Native Americans with humanity and respect. I don't think it's fair to suggest I'm ignoring history." Amanpour leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but unrelenting. "I'm not suggesting that, I'm simply asking if you think your perspective, as a white male filmmaker, can fully capture the indigenous experience." That was the spark. Costner exhaled through his nose, visibly trying to maintain composure. "I don't claim to speak for anyone but the characters I create. I tell human stories, about conflict, hope, and survival. If we can't tell those stories without being accused of bias, then what's left of art?" The studio fell silent. Amanpour didn't flinch. "But surely you understand that films like yours carry cultural weight. They shape how audiences see history. Don't artists bear responsibility for the impact of their narratives?" Costner's voice grew firmer. "I think responsibility cuts both ways. Journalists, too, shape narratives. Maybe we should all be careful about turning everything into a political argument." That line landed like a hammer. Amanpour blinked once, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. The control room crackled with whispered voices. "Do we cut to break?" "No, hold it, this is gold." She leaned in again. "Are you saying it's political to question representation? Or just inconvenient?" Costner's chair creaked as he leaned back, eyes sharp. "I'm saying it's tiresome. Every time someone tries to make something meaningful, it gets reduced to an agenda. Maybe people should watch the movie before dissecting it." Amanpour started to respond, but Costner cut her off, his tone rising just enough to carry authority and irritation. "Christiane, I came here to talk about storytelling, not to get grilled like I'm defending a crime. You're twisting my words. You've already decided what this movie is, and I can't fix that for you." The studio's quiet professionalism dissolved into unease. Crew members pretended to check cables that didn't need checking. Someone in the control booth muttered, "Oh no, he's walking." Amanpour tried to regain control. "Kevin, I'm not attacking you. I'm simply exploring how." But Costner was already removing his microphone. "Exploring? It sounds more like accusing. You're not listening, Christiane." You're framing the conversation to fit your headline. He stood up, his face calm but eyes burning with disappointment. I thought this was about the work. My mistake. And with that, he turned and walked off set. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the silent studio. Amanpour sat motionless for a moment, the faintest trace of frustration flickering across her composed expression before she turned back to the camera. "We'll be right back," she said smoothly. But as the broadcast cut to commercial, everyone in the room knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary, the kind of live TV moment that doesn't fade quietly. Within minutes of Kevin Costner storming off the CNN set, the footage was everywhere. Someone from inside the control room had clipped the moment and shared it with a producer, who leaked it before the segment had even officially aired. By noon, social media was ablaze. The headline dominated feeds across platforms. Kevin Costner walks out on Christiane Amanpour during live interview. The 30-second clip showed everything: Amanpour's firm tone, Costner's glare, the removal of his mic, and his final words, "You're framing the conversation to fit your headline." The internet exploded. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even Reddit, every corner of the digital world was dissecting what had happened. Fans rallied to Costner's defense, claiming Amanpour had ambushed him with politically charged questions. "He's an artist, not a politician," one user wrote. "Christiane's out here trying to make everything about culture wars." Others, however, sided with Amanpour, arguing that her questions were legitimate. "If you make movies about American history, you have to face the history," one commenter posted. The clash became a full-blown debate about art, accountability, and freedom of expression. Back in Los Angeles, Costner sat in the back of a black SUV, staring blankly out the window as traffic crept along Sunset Boulevard. His publicist, Dana Reeves, was glued to her phone, scrolling through notifications. "Kevin, we've got crisis PR already calling," she said quietly. CNN just released a statement calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding. And Variety wants a comment by tonight. Costner didn't respond at first. He just ran a hand through his hair and sighed. "I've been in this business 40 years, Dana. I've dealt with tough interviews. But this was different." She wasn't asking questions. She was baiting me. Dana hesitated. "You know she's not going to back down. Amanpour's built her career on asking hard questions. If we hit back, it could make things worse." He turned to her, eyes tired but sharp. "I don't care about the spin. I care about the truth. That movie, Horizon, it's my life's work. And now people will see it through the lens of a 10-minute argument." By evening, CNN aired a trimmed version of the interview, cutting off the explosive ending but keeping enough tension to hint at what happened. They followed it with Amanpour's calm explanation: "Mr. Costner and I had a passionate exchange about art and history. I respect him deeply, but journalism must always ask the difficult questions." Her tone was diplomatic, but the fire behind her words was unmistakable. In the hours that followed, pundits flooded news segments with hot takes. One cable host joked, "Looks like Costner finally found a showdown he couldn't win." Another, on a rival network, called the moment a rare case of Hollywood meeting hard truth. YouTube commentators broke down the video frame by frame: Costner's expression, Amanpour's tone, even the second he reached for the mic. By the next morning, Costner's team was in damage control mode. Dana had lined up an appearance on Entertainment Tonight to set the record straight. But Costner refused. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not feeding the beast. I said what I said. If people can't see where I was coming from, that's on them." Still, the controversy didn't fade. Instead, it fueled renewed interest in Horizon. The trailer, which had been sitting at a modest 5 million views, suddenly rocketed past 20 million overnight. Filmgoers who hadn't cared before now wanted to see the movie that caused all the noise. 2 days later, Costner appeared at the Santa Fe Film Festival for a Q&A session. The theater was packed. Reporters buzzed in the back rows, waiting for him to address the elephant in the room. When he finally took the stage, wearing a simple leather jacket and jeans, the applause was thunderous. He smiled faintly and raised a hand. "Look," he began, his voice calm but weighted with sincerity, "I've had a few intense days. I'm sure most of you have seen what happened on CNN. I lost my temper. That's on me. But I want to make something clear: I'm passionate about storytelling. I care about history, I care about truth, and I care about doing justice to the people who came before us. That's what Horizon is about. Not politics, humanity." The crowd erupted in applause. Some even stood. In that moment, the tension of the past few days seemed to melt away. Meanwhile, in London, Christiane Amanpour addressed the incident on her nightly international broadcast. "My interview with Kevin Costner has sparked debate, and that's the point of journalism. My role isn't to comfort the comfortable but to challenge perspectives, even when it's uncomfortable." Her delivery was calm, but her message was sharp. She wasn't apologizing, she was doubling down. Over the next week, the Costner vs. Amanpour saga became a case study in media circles. Professors debated it in journalism classes, bloggers turned it into a symbol of the widening gap between art and politics. Costner's public image, surprisingly, came out stronger, rugged, defiant, a man unwilling to bend to the pressures of modern outrage culture. When Horizon, an American epic, premiered later that month, the crowd in the Los Angeles theater gave Costner a standing ovation before the credits even rolled. Outside, a CNN reporter waited for comment, but Costner just smiled slightly and said, "Sometimes, stories speak louder than interviews." Back in her London studio, Amanpour caught that clip on air and smirked. "Touché, Mr. Costner," she murmured to herself. In the end, both got what they wanted: attention, impact, and the kind of cultural moment that blurs the line between conflict and conversation. What began as a fiery clash on live TV had turned into something bigger, a modern parable about pride, purpose, and the price of speaking one's truth.